So Pastor Jim asked me to speak and give my testimony a few weeks ago, and I started thinking about what I should say 38 seconds ago or so, and realized, giving your testimony is really hard. I've seen now that you've done this several times where you bring someone up and you have them give like a quick 15 to hour-long testimony, and I just want to let you know, when he asks you next, it's hard for everyone, even ministers. I've been a minister for going on 14 years now, but to understand my journey, you sort of need to know where I came from. I was raised in a family that didn't go to church so much. I didn't raise in a church-going family so much as I was a church-adjacent family, aware of. I had a very, God may she rest in peace, I had a very faithful grandmother who was one of the founding members of what was then known as the Tri-County Assemblies of God. And she would manage to guilt my mother into taking us once or twice a year, so seldom that we wouldn't even know which children's church we belonged in. I ended up in the wrong thing every time. And that was kind of my entire church experience from the age of little till 11, 12, when we moved away from Cincinnati to Aurora, Indiana. And we went from one to twice a year, went to none. And eventually my grandmother followed us out, because again, she was just a faithful woman who saw a need, is my only guess, because why would you move from Cincinnati to Dillsboro in the end? And she lived with us for a little while, and she needed to find a new church. And I don't know how you found one, though, back in the days before Google. I'm guessing phone book, because she ended up finding Church on the Rock in Versailles, Indiana, of all places. And she looked around for someone to take with her. And me being the good grandson, I went. And if you could just imagine this for a moment, my entire experience of church has been Tri-County Assembly of God, giant, huge church with its own building for the children. Versailles Church on the Rock was a one-room building that used to be a dog kennel. And we didn't know that back then. It's different now. Versailles is on a different time zone than the rest of the world. So we showed up early, an hour early, and we ended up stuck with me in this kids area for teens, and I'm not even a teen yet. And the very first lesson is all about speaking in tongues, and they're on the third lesson of that. And I was really lost. And then we went out for the sermon. I don't remember the sermon. This was the least impressive church I could possibly be in with no church experience whatsoever. And I tell you all that because it was also the most important day of my life. On the way home, my grandmother said, sorry. She said, Josh, you're young, but it's important you know that Jesus is your Savior, and you're not too young to give yourself over to Him right now. And that was it, the entire message, beginning to end. I was your age, I wasn't too young, you're not too young either. If you haven't done it, do it today. And so when I got home, I went into my bedroom, kicked my brother out, and I prayed to Jesus, and I gave my life over to Him. And I tell you all that because it's one of the most important things you can know is, for one, your children are not too young to tell them the importance of Jesus, and that today is the day when you give your heart over. Today is the day. But also that you need to follow up with them afterwards, because my grandmother didn't. And I didn't tell her. I didn't tell her that that meant something to me, that resonated to me, that you, my grandmother, said this was important, and so I believed you because you're my grandmother. Your children will believe you because you are their parents and their grandparents. Your friends will believe you because they know you. But I didn't tell her. So I never went back to church. She ended up moving out to Dillsboro. She developed a strong relationship with Church on the Rock. I continued to believe in God. And it was okay if God was over there and I was over here and we didn't bother each other. It was Aurora, Indiana. Steeple Town is what Aurora is called, because in the riverboat days, you could see all the steeples coming up. Everyone believed that, but just believing isn't enough. James tells us that faith without good works is dead. Well, faith without even attending church is really dead. And so by the time I was 16, I had a child. I was as far from God as you can get. And I think my grandmother had given up on me just a little bit because of that. Like, he's a kid with a kid. He doesn't come to church, and I gave it my all. Let me tell you something. You plant seeds, you don't know what happens with those seeds. Someone else may do the watering. Someone else may do the harvesting. God gets the glory, right? Because when I was 17, I was in choir. No, I will not sing for worship. And show choir, because I like to dance. But I was in choir, and we in Indiana had this thing where a bunch of local high schools got together and they would put on a concert. And we would sing religious songs in a public school setting. It was the 90s and it was Aurora, Indiana. What can I tell you? You couldn't get away with that now. But as someone who never attended church and as someone who was just in choir, I never examined the words of the songs I was singing. I was paying attention to whether or not I was hitting the right notes and harmonizing well. So literally in the middle of the concert, I'm singing this song that's taken from Samuel where he's saying, "Here I am, Lord, send me." In the middle of the song, I start hearing from God saying, so by the way, Josh, this is about someone being called to ministry. The "here I am" is an answer to a call. And now I am calling you into ministry. And I felt like I had two choices at that point. Either A, I could answer the call that God has just put on my life, or B, I could commit myself to an asylum because I must be a crazy person. I'm hearing voices in my head. And I decided to settle on I'm not crazy. And I reached out to my grandmother, who, shocker, was very happy to hear from Josh about ministry and wanting to be a minister. And she had some basic advice for me. You should probably start attending church. She brought me to Church on the Rock, that little building that did not impress me. And I started telling people, I have faith now. I believe now. I mean, I always believed, but I want to do something with that faith now. I want to be a minister. And I can tell you that not a single person believed me other than my grandmother. And I think Pastor Roger, the lead pastor of Church on the Rock, kind of just put up with me. Like, I'm not going to turn someone away, but I don't know what to make of this person. Because at the time, I was dating the absolute most beautiful woman in the entire world, who's perfect in every way. Her name is Julia. She's sitting right back there. But what you may not know is that Julia is a pastor's kid. And so everyone just assumed I was doing this to impress my girlfriend. What they don't know is that that's the worst way to impress a pastor's kid. Especially a Lutheran pastor kid who lives in the rectory next to the church. They experienced the fishbowl life. She didn't want that anymore. I think she almost broke up with me on the spot. No one believed me except my grandmother and my pastor at the time, who didn't know what to make of me, but just wasn't willing to turn me away, but gave me a chance. And I'm telling you all this because you will be called to do things in life, and people won't believe you. And you should examine it. God won't call you to do unbiblical things. If God is saying, get divorced and go start a casino, actually that is not God saying that. But if you have examined some call on your life and you find it to be biblical and sound, and you've spoken with Pastor Jim as well, and no one else believes you, that doesn't matter. As long as God believes in you and what you're doing because he called you to do it, it may be hard and it may be difficult, but he will get you there, and you should go after it, because the alternative will always be worse in every way and end up worse in every way. And I know that because I have walked away from my calling. I have walked away from what I was supposed to do. It was not easy. By the time I got to college, I had lost contact with my daughter. And last time I saw her, she was 4 years old, right before I went to college, and I basically never got to see her again. And college, Bible college, was not fun, not easy, at times not healthy. And I fell out twice. I failed out twice and walked away going, what do I get for all this? What do I get for all this? Pursuing this path that you've laid before me. I lost my child I have all this debt that I feel like I could never pay back. Paid off, by the way. What do I get for all this? But with some guidance from my beautiful and lovely, perfect wife, I went back to Indiana School of Ministry and I finished out. I became a minister. I served as a children's pastor, a youth pastor. I served as a PAC, like what this church is over in Versailles. Versailles took over Batesville. I restarted Versailles. I've served at Mosaic. I've served at Life Church Oak Hills. I've served at Life Church Cincinnati. I've started up kids ministries. I've started up youth ministries. I have seen people turn their lives over to God, and none of that would have been possible in my life if I had continued to walk away from the path that He laid before me. And yes, it was hard at times. Yes, it was difficult. Yes, there were so many days when I said, I will never see my daughter again. I know she has no idea who I even am, that I even exist. She hasn't seen me since she was 4. How could she remember? And then her freshman year, she reached out to me on Messenger, Facebook Messenger, said, hey, my name is Michaela. Do you know who I am? I think it helped that I immediately said, yes, I know who you are. I know what college you're at. I know you're there on a lacrosse scholarship. I know what you look like. I have stalked you in the most pure and intended way. I was telling Pastor Jim this earlier, but yesterday I attended a reception for a wedding. My daughter got married. Saw her new husband. We have a different relationship than you might have had I been there the whole time, and I wish I could have been. But we have a strong relationship. She calls me Dad, and I don't feel like I could ever earn that. But God redeemed me. He's been faithful and true. And she has always been right. Because I was always convinced I'd never hear from her again. And Julie has always said, just have patience and hope and faith. God can do anything. So I have 3 points of advice for you today as I wrap up. If you have a call on your life, don't run from it. Run toward it. Seek out your pastor. They'll give you the guidance. It won't be easy. God didn't promise it'd be easy. Jesus never promised it'd be easy. He said, take up your cross to follow me. The cross had one purpose when he said that. It wasn't to be pretty jewelry or stuck on a wall. The cross was to be crucified. He wasn't promising an easy path. But it will be good. Good and easy are not always the same thing. In fact, good is often hard. And have faith. Because when it is hard, know that you are not alone. God is walking there with you. My strong ministry, my ability to serve here, I've never actually been a full-time paid pastor. And I've never wanted to be, and I've never needed to be, because God has always provided me the jobs I needed with the amount of money I needed to pay all the bills, and then some. He has provided in excess. Most churches cannot afford me, which means I get to serve in places like this that could not afford me. I love that. I love being able to help in places like this. God will provide if you go after Him. And if there's a 4th piece of advice I might throw out there, always listen to your wife. Wow, I got a lot of amens for that. I wonder why. Your testimony doesn't have to be bombastic. It doesn't have to be a Paul call. It doesn't have to be how you got knocked off a donkey and God showed up in a great big ball of light. You can be someone like me who just always believed. What matters is what you do with that belief. We are ministers to ministers. You are ministers. Your mission field is that way and that way. And it's up to you to bring people into this church. It is up to you to tell people about the goodness and love of God. It is up to you to have faith that God will provide. We can't do that for you. We can only show you the way, but you've got to take the steps. God has always provided for me. I know He will always provide for you. Not in the ways you expect, not in the ways that you'd probably prefer sometimes. I have prayed for $1 million. That hasn't happened yet. But I've also prayed that somehow, just some way, a daughter who didn't know who I existed, and she didn't, would somehow find me, and she did. That a ministry could happen even though it seemed out of reach, impossibly expensive, and it did. That people would just believe me, and given time, they did. God has answered every prayer and more. I have a wonderful family, an amazing son, a beautiful wife, a fantastic daughter, a strong ministry. And I am ever so grateful and ever so thankful. And that isn't even all of it, but I know you want to eat. So I'm going to pray over the food. If you have any questions for me, I'm always open for you. But be blessed and have faith. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you that you give us this message. I hope these words are not mine but yours, to remind us that you are a faithful and loving God who takes care of us. You are the provider. You know what needs we have. You own all the land, so when it requires, you can sell the cows and provide the funds. And you have done that time and time and time again. So we come here not to ask you for more, but thank you for what you have done and will do. We put our faith and trust in you. And if there's anyone here who has experienced that pain of aloneness, of loss, let them know that you do provide and you do answer and you can reconcile just about anything. You soften hearts. We thank you for all you're doing. Lord, I ask you to bless this food today. You bless our travels. We thank you for bringing Pastor Jim back to us safely and his family. We thank you for all that you do. Amen.